In this video, we're diving into one of the most savage killings to hit Liverpool's underworld. The torture and execution of Joseph McKeever. A father, a fixer, a man who ended up burned in the boot of a stolen car. It started with a missing cannabis shipment, nearly £1 million worth, and spiraled into a storm of paranoia and violence. A van torched near the M57 and a crew of 6. A street-level mechanic, a gangster rapper with a Twitter alias, and a drug boss who ran to Spain and lived under a false name for 3 years. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a case of gangland justice. There's something darker buried at the center of it, a cruel twist at the end that changes everything. The rain was steady, falling gently across the tarmac at a customs checkpoint in East Sussex. A refrigerated lorry rolled into the bay just after dawn, its wheels hissing as they passed through. The driver stepped out calmly, clipboard in hand, wearing a high-vis vest. There was nothing unusual about him, no nerves, no hesitation. Just another haul, just another form to stamp. Inside the trailer, cold air clung to neat rows of crates, each one labeled, logged, and positioned to look routine. Broccoli, courgettes, cauliflower, the smell of chilled plastic, the faint hum of refrigeration. To the untrained eye, it was just vegetables. But beneath the top layer, buried deep inside the load, was something else entirely. 150 kilograms of cannabis, vacuum sealed in tightly packed bricks. Spanish grown, expertly wrapped, and worth close to £900,000 once it hit the streets of Liverpool. A customs officer, unaware of what he was about to set in motion, sliced open a crate. The seal gave way with a soft hiss. In seconds, the deception was revealed. The trailer wasn't carrying food. It was carrying a fortune, and someone's head was going to roll. Back in Liverpool, Joseph McKeever was going about his day. A familiar face in the Walton area, a man with deep ties in the cannabis trade, and a quiet reputation for moving weight across borders. Alongside his partner, James "Jimmy" Doyle, he'd arranged the shipment, handling the logistics from Spain to Sutton Coldfield, where it would pass to 2 waiting buyers, Lee Knox and Jamie Grimes. Knox was older and volatile, whilst Grimes, young and ambitious. They'd been making money together for over a year, running cannabis in bulk across Merseyside. But this time, there would be no delivery, no handshake, and no payout. The lorry was gone, the product seized and no one arrested. There was no warning given, just silence, and 900 grams worth of weed vanished without explanation. For Knox, that silence was betrayal. And his patience was thin. He wanted answers. He wanted them fast. And within 72 hours, someone would be dead. A meeting took place on June 13th, just 2 days before the discovery of Joseph McKeever's body. He walked into the Royal Oak pub in Walton. It was familiar territory with familiar faces. But this meeting wasn't casual. Sitting inside were Lee Knox and Jamie Grimes, and joining them was another face from the Liverpool drug world, Anthony Wales. Known on the streets as Wiggy, a convicted robber and drug dealer from Everton, Wales wasn't there for small talk. He was there for pressure. What happened inside that pub didn't make the papers, but the CCTV outside told its own story. McKeever is seen embracing Knox, arms around shoulders like old friends, a show of trust, a gesture to diffuse tension. Minutes later, he's seen again, this time, hands held together as if in prayer, directed at Knox. Not a threat, a plea. This was no longer a business deal, it was a situation. Knox was becoming convinced that someone had lied to him. The missing cannabis shipment hadn't just hurt his wallet, it had shaken his standing. In a world built on respect, silence from the people you pay is its own kind of insult. And Knox didn't believe in coincidence. To him, Doyle was acting strange, nervous, evasive. But McKeever was present, reachable, vulnerable, and in Knox's mind, increasingly likely to have played him. The paranoia was blooming, quiet and poisonous. And Joseph McKeever was now a marked man. The day after the meeting at the Royal Oak, a new plan was set in motion. On June 14th, Lee Knox, Joseph McKeever and James Doyle got into a car and headed south, heading to Sutton Coldfield. It was a calculated move. This was where the seized shipment was supposed to have landed, a last-ditch effort to get answers, or at least verify what had gone wrong. They spent hours in the Birmingham area, trying to piece together the final leg of a deal that had already collapsed. But nothing turned up. No delivery, and no trace of the missing cargo. By the time they returned to Liverpool, the atmosphere had changed. Knox had been watching them both, and while he hadn't said much during the trip, something had shifted. He would later tell jurors that Doyle's behavior had raised red flags, said he was acting strangely, evasive, nervous. McKeever too had noticed it. At some point, he confided to Knox that he no longer trusted Doyle, that he wanted out of the partnership entirely. But for Knox, this wasn't reassurance, it was confirmation. He didn't know who to trust, but he knew someone was lying. And whether it was Doyle, McKeever, or both, someone had to be held accountable. The money was gone, the shipment was gone, and Knox's patience was gone with it. It was just before 6 p.m. on June 14th. A silver Citroën van rolled quietly into a side street in Kensington. The sky was beginning to dim. Rain from earlier still clung to the ground. Everything looked ordinary. Joseph McKeever walked toward the entrance of MGM Garages, a nondescript auto unit off Butler Street. A green shipping container sat at the rear of the site, tucked behind a row of metal fencing and forgotten tools. To anyone passing by, it was just another storage unit. But Joseph wasn't coming here for car repairs. Alongside him were Lee Knox, Jamie Grimes, and Anthony Wales. The four men entered the yard, and Joseph followed them, not knowing this would be the last time anyone would see him alive. Inside the unit, Jamie Grimes moved with purpose. CCTV footage later showed him walking out, then returning minutes later with a long silver tool and a length of black strapping. It wasn't mechanical equipment. It wasn't for fixing anything. Next came plastic sheeting, then the van, cleared out and reversed up to the container. Grimes made sure the rear light was working. He didn't want to get pulled over on the road. What took place inside that container would later be described in court as remorseless. When Joseph McKeever's body was discovered in the boot of a burnt-out car, investigators were faced with one of the most disturbing post-mortem reports they had ever seen. His injuries told the story. According to Home Office pathologist Dr. Paul Johnson, McKeever had suffered multiple blunt force traumas and had been subjected to what the court would later describe as nothing less than torture. His body was found lying face up in the back of the vehicle, alongside blood-stained clothing and trainers, evidence that had survived even the flames. The most severe injury was a blunt force trauma to the head, resulting in catastrophic brain damage. But it didn't stop there. Both kneecaps had been shattered. An injury so rare and brutal, Dr. Johnson said he had never encountered anything like it. The damage was consistent with repeated strikes using a hammer-type object. His eye sockets were broken, 3 ribs were fractured. A deep, sharp wound had torn through his jaw, removing bone in what the doctor described as a chop-like injury. His voice box had been crushed. And worst of all, he had been strangled not once, but at least twice, using a ligature. It was one of several causes of death. Each injury spoke to sustained violence. not the kind delivered in a flash of rage, but methodical, deliberate harm inflicted over time. McKeever's final hours were spent bound, beaten, and isolated, and by the time he was moved from the container, he was no longer conscious. Within hours, he was gone. The brutality shocked even veteran detectives, and it confirmed what the physical evidence already made clear. This wasn't punishment. This was execution. After the violence inside the container, Joseph McKeever was moved. His final destination, a small, sparsely furnished flat on Picton Crescent, Wavertree. The property belonged to Darren Cole-Cozy, a cannabis dealer and aspiring rapper, known by the street name Caps. Though he later claimed to have been caught off guard by McKeever's arrival, evidence would suggest otherwise. Inside that flat, McKeever's condition worsened. Whether he was still conscious is unclear, but he never left the flat alive. Once he died, the men didn't panic. They cleaned. Cole-Cozy and his associate Carl Kelly both put on gloves and began wiping down the scene. The work was extensive. Forensic teams would later find blood on the kitchen walls, inside the microwave, and on a mattress in the living room, a mattress that appeared to have been doused in petrol. On the floor near it, police discovered a canister of fuel and a roll of brown tape, suggesting that there had been serious consideration of burning the flat itself. But the most critical mistakes were small. Anthony Wales used the toilet and left his DNA behind. Nearby, a cigarette butt was recovered, containing DNA from both Knox and McKeever. These fragments would go on to form the backbone of the forensic case. Proof that not only had McKeever died there, but that his killers had tried to erase him. With Joseph McKeever dead, the focus turned to disposal. The goal was simple: get rid of the evidence, destroy vehicles, leave nothing behind. Late in the afternoon on June 15th, a Citroën Nemo van was driven to a quiet stretch of grassland off Burton's Way in Kirby, just beyond Junction 6 of the M57. It was the same van used to transport McKeever between locations, and it belonged to Jamie Grimes. By the time emergency services arrived, it was engulfed in flames. There were no witnesses, no suspects on the scene, just scorched metal and silence. Later that night, a black Renault Megane was discovered torched in Newsham Park, Fairfield. That car belonged to Joseph McKeever himself. It had also been used in the hours surrounding his murder. Police found it abandoned and burned out, another deliberate act to remove any forensic trace. But the most horrifying discovery came just before 11 p.m. At 10:55, an electric blue Ford Focus ST was seen on CCTV mounting a curb on Wyre Road in Everton. It rolled slowly into a patch of overgrown wasteland behind the St. Domingo car park. 2 minutes later, the car was set alight. The fire burned hot and fast. When fire crews arrived, the arsonist was long gone. They opened the boot and found the remains of a man, badly burned, unrecognizable, but still wearing blood-stained clothes. It would take days for police to confirm what they already suspected. It was Joseph McKeever. 3 vehicles, 3 fires, all set within hours, and all part of a coordinated attempt to burn the truth. The fire crews who responded to the burning Ford Focus on Wyre Road weren't expecting to find a body. When they opened the boot, they discovered charred remains. The scene was horrific, and immediately, the case was escalated to a full homicide investigation. It took days for detectives to identify the victim. The damage was extensive. But when the body was confirmed as Joseph McKeever, the case shifted gears. Forensic teams began their work. They examined the body, the burnt-out vehicle, and the limited physical evidence that had survived the fire. From there, they turned their focus to nearby garages and known associates. starting with the last place McKeever was believed to be seen, MGM Garages, off Butler Street. That's where things started to unravel. CCTV footage showed McKeever walking toward a green shipping container with 3 other men, Lee Knox, Jamie Grimes, and Anthony Wales. Minutes later, Grimes was captured on camera leaving the site to retrieve items. None of the men were seen leaving with McKeever. What the footage also revealed was what happened after the fact. Grimes returned to the container later that night and tried to clean the inside with oil. He also attempted to delete the CCTV footage itself, but failed. Every move left a trace. Detectives also uncovered further forensic links from other scenes. At the flat in Wavertree, DNA evidence was discovered. Across all locations, the cleanup efforts couldn't hide everything. Piece by piece, the case came together. There was no single mistake that exposed them. It was the accumulation of sloppy decisions and overconfidence. A CCTV system left running. A wipe down that didn't go far enough. A DNA trail no fire could destroy. And in the end, the evidence told the story better than any of them ever would. In the hours after Joseph McKeever's body was discovered, some of the men responsible were already gone. Jamie Grimes didn't waste time. By the evening of June 15th, just hours after setting fire to the Ford Focus that held McKeever's remains, Grimes and Lee Knox were on the move. They fled Liverpool and headed south, slipping quietly out of the city. By 8:30 that night, they were on a Eurostar train, crossing into France. There were no confrontations, no high-speed chases, just a silent exit before the police even knew what had happened. Knox vanished deeper. He made it all the way to Spain, where he built a new life under a false name, Oliver Kennedy. For nearly 3 years, he stayed hidden. No slips, no arrests, just another man blending in under the sun. But justice doesn't forget. Grimes was the first to fall. He was arrested in Spain at the end of August 2017, barely 2 months after the murder, and extradited back to the UK to face trial. His hands were already stained by the evidence, and by then, his silence could only delay the inevitable. Knox lasted longer, but on April 25th, 2020, he was finally found. Not in Spain, but in Belfast, still using the alias Oliver Kennedy. When police took him in, the 3-year manhunt came to a quiet end. There was no dramatic standoff, just a name, a face, and the truth that had finally caught up. The case didn't end with one trial. It took 3 separate courtrooms to bring justice to Joseph McKeever's killers. Jamie Grimes, the young mechanic who helped organize the meeting, tie up the victim, and clean the scene, was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 27 years. Lee Knox, the man who planned it, fled the country and hid under a false name for nearly 3 years, was also found guilty of murder. He received life with a minimum of 30 years. Anthony Wales, the enforcer, known on the streets as Wiggy, pleaded guilty. He was given life with a minimum of 24 years. Carl Kelly and Darren Colacosi, the men who offered up the flat, cleaned the crime scene, and stood by as McKeever died, were both convicted of manslaughter and false imprisonment. They each received 22 years. And Dylan Owen, a friend of Grimes who helped burn out the getaway vehicles, was sentenced to 6 years for assisting an offender. Joseph McKeever was beaten, tortured, and left to die because someone believed he'd stolen £900,000 worth of cannabis. But he hadn't. The truth emerged within days. The entire shipment, over 145 kilograms of Spanish cannabis, had been intercepted by customs officers at the port of New Haven. There was no theft, No double cross. Just a failed import. And the wrong man held responsible. James Jimmy Doyle, the man who had arranged the transport, was nowhere to be found. He wasn't answering his phone. He didn't show up to meetings. He simply faded from view when things started to unravel. But Joseph McKeever was still around. He stayed in Liverpool. He kept turning up. He took the calls, faced the questions, and even traveled to Sutton Coldfield with Knox in an effort to sort things out. He was trying to fix the mess. And in doing so, he made himself a target. He wasn't the thief. He was simply the one left holding the silence when everyone else disappeared. In that moment, it didn't matter that the drugs had been seized. It didn't matter that he was trying to help. What mattered was that he was there and the others weren't. Joseph McKeever stuck around. And because of that, he paid the ultimate price. For more raw and real crime stories, hit the like button and subscribe. Until the next episode, stay alert and stay safe.